Hello, welcome to the Writing Gals. Today we're going to be talking about characters, specifically focusing on writing kids and writing senior citizens. And hopefully before the podcast is over, I'll learn how to talk again. So you might hear my dog in the background. I'm sorry, this is a new thing we're trying to figure out around here. So before we get going with our really exciting topic today, we're going to touch base on what everybody's been doing. So, Judy, tell us how your last 2 weeks has been.
It's been great. I went on a writing retreat last week. We almost died, but we're alive. We almost didn't have this YouTube channel anymore because of the snowy mountain roads, but we're all here. So I've been writing in my book. I added up my word count numbers yesterday. January, I had 15,000 total words because I was just starting a book, and that's always so slow for me. February, I had 23,000 words. So it was a little better, but still not so great compared to lots of other people. But then this, from March so far, just in the last 17 days, I'd had 38,000 words. So it just ends of the books are great for me. So I just need to always be writing at the end of the book, I think, to have good word counts. Anyway, so I'm feeling good. I'm getting really close to the end of my book. It's the longest one I've ever written so far. It's already at almost 82,000 words, and I'm still not done. So
this is a first in your new series, right?
Yeah. So I'm
kind of setting a precedent for your workout for the rest of the series,
I guess. No, hopefully it's still enjoyable enough that people will keep turning those pages, and I'll get the page reads because I'm in Kindle Unlimited. So, but yeah, it's just more involved in this story than others, I guess. I don't know. So, but it's been fun. I'm really enjoying it, and I hope that readers will like it too, because it's kind of what has a storyline that I've always wanted to write. So we'll see how that goes. Anyway, so I'm feeling good about writing. It's great.
That's awesome. And how about you, Victorine?
I am doing the same. I'm in the middle of a book. I'm not near the end yet, but I'm in the midpoint. I just reached about the midpoint just today. So super excited. I got 9,000 words written during the retreat, which is actually good for me. I don't usually write that much during a retreat. So I was super excited about that. And I have another writer's retreat this month. And so I'm hoping to bang out some words then and just get this book all done. So
awesome.
Awesome. You're going to be cheating on us, though. That's
retreating with other writers.
What?
Shame on me. I know. Terrible.
You shouldn't be so popular, Victorine. You need to be just me, who doesn't have any other friends besides you guys.
Well, we all have many writer friends. Don't talk like you don't, Judy. We all need.
They're no secret friends, though. No one knows.
They're secret friends. I wrote 15,000 words on a retreat, which I think is pretty good for me. I think I'm usually around that mark, but I wanted to write more. So I guess I'm feeling a little disappointed in myself, but I have to cut myself some slack because I hurt my back really bad. And today is the best I've felt since February 25th when I heard it.
Oh, I'm so glad you're feeling better.
I know. I woke up this morning and I was I just got out of bed, and then I bent over and picked something up, and I was like, oh, wow, this is more like how it's supposed to work.
Yeah.
So
nice.
It's just amazing the toll that an injury can take on your emotions and your energy and your ability to sit down and do something. So that slowed me down. I had to push back my deadline. I had to contact my editor, but at the same time, it's probably a good thing because I'm at 30,000 words in my manuscript, which would normally be at least midpoint for me, maybe slightly over. And it doesn't feel, I'm not at midpoint in my plot yet. So this is going to be a longer book, and I'm going to need more time with it because it's also a little experimental and a little different for me. So I'm going to need more editing time. It's not going to fit into my publish a book a month goal. It's not going to fit into my right to market, make money goal. I don't know what I'm doing, but it is fun and I'm passionate about it. So I'm going to keep going. And you just got to do that sometimes.
Yep.
And we'll just mention that Amy is in the middle of moving her family right now. So they're trying to pack up and move from one house and get ready to move down here by me in Arkansas. Sorry, Quincy is not happy with my cat. Hey, you're making it onto YouTube and Facebook, and you need to be quiet. Okay, so we are going to excuse her for the day, and we're going to talk a little bit now about our. Hold on, I'm going to call my get a hold of my husband and tell him to come get us. Oh, he might be in the shower.
Oh no.
Okay, I'm going to have to just mute a lot, I guess. Okay, so we're going to talk about our topic today. This was kind of my idea to talk about. It's something that I get a lot of questions about, or that I give a lot of feedback about. If I'm critiquing for other people or beta reading or something like that, then I have to talk about it with them because they have issues with kids and elderly. What has been your experience, guys?
Good. I don't know. I have read somewhere like the kids have sometimes seemed like way too young for their age, or acted way too old for their age, and so that's kind of like been. I think they got the age number wrong on that one, but that's really like all I can think. Usually, I like the kids. Usually, they bring a little fun into a story, or say something that's like embarrasses the character, or bring in the cuteness factor, and so I don't know. Usually they're.
So one of the main problems I've seen is sometimes there's a kid, but the writer doesn't utilize them enough. So they're just there, but they're not really interacting or part of the story, or just kind of, I don't know, a piece that isn't really utilized. So I think maybe sometimes instead of just saying, the kids in the room, have them interact with the characters a little more. That's probably the main problem I see, other than what Judy said, which is they're not aged right. They talk either too low for their the age they're saying they are, or they're too intelligent for a 3-year-old or whatever.
Yeah. Thanks for giving me that update on what Judy had said, so I didn't.
Yeah.
Very nice. Okay. Another thing that I see happen with kids, kid characters, is that they are just perfect little angels. So they're just little cherubs, and they're so sweet, and they have manners, and they don't interrupt the adults, and they don't leave messes for their mom to clean up, and they don't fight with their siblings or their, and I'm just like,
you're setting people up with some bad expectations for when they become parents. They're like, what? Where did I get these devils from?
Yes. And I get why they make him that way, because for one thing, it makes him cute and likable, and it doesn't cause any plot problems, and it doesn't make it difficult to maintain dialogue between your two, other characters, or 3 other characters, whatever you have going on. So that's kind of my thing, is that I think authors consider kids to be just this really inconvenient puzzle piece, right? And sometimes it's necessary, based on your trope, to have the kid in there, or what your plot needs, but they're also inconvenient and cause problems. So they're not portrayed realistically. So in a little bit, we'll probably get into some ideas on how we can do that. I just wanted to mention, for those of you who are watching right now, we'd love to hear your questions that you have about writing kids and writing older adults. So be sure at any time, go ahead and drop questions. We want to know what you guys want to hear about from us. Another note that I've made is that I think a lot of authors don't give their children characters enough credit for being intelligent and perceptive individuals. And even at, very, very young ages, 18 months, 2 years old, where they're starting to put sentences together. Even before then, their brains are working at a much higher rate than they're able to communicate. And that can lead to them, being sensitive emotionally to what's going on around them. It can lead to them having, being inclined to have temper tantrums or being stubborn because they want something that they can't communicate. And especially if your kids are older to where they are able to communicate well, allow them to be active players in the plot. Allow them to, make key pivotal pushes or nudges on your characters and the decisions that they make and how they feel about things, and whether or not, especially since kids in romances are almost always going to be involved in the future happiness of the couple, it's important to see how they are going to react and interact and get along with the new person in their life. And so just keep all those things in mind, that those are some common pitfalls that we see with children characters. But what are some of the tropes that people might be using in their story that's going to make having children in your plot like almost necessary or definitely necessary?
Well, I have one coming up that'll be secret baby trope. And that's one that I don't know that you can get away with not having a kid in the story.
Yeah. I was trying to say, but I think I was muted. Like the single dad trope, definitely. That's a big one.
Yeah. Yep.
Can't be a dad without a kid.
Or single moms.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then sometimes you just have kids it's not necessarily part of the dynamics of the trope, but it's just part of the world that you build around your characters.
Mm-hmm.
And kids can add a lot of fun to a book. They can make life difficult for your characters. They can add a comedic element. They can be, it's amazing because I've done a class on different characters and how to not be cliche with them. And there's a certain character type, which is like the mentor, like the person that gives the wise advice. And I always think it's fun when it's the kid giving the adult the wise advice,
Mm-hmm.
when you kind of flip that mentor role a little bit and have some fun with it. So, I think that, I was really worried when I was a new author to write kids in my book. It was something that I kind of avoided, and I wasn't a huge fan of the single parent tropes anyway, because that brought a lot of baggage from previous relationships and stuff like that. And we all know how much I kind of hate conflict. So, I used to think I didn't like it. And then I finally wrote one and I just loved it. It turned out to be something I really, really enjoyed writing. So let's see here. Julie Spencer wants to know, how do you have kids talk without sounding too old or too young?
Get to know a lot of kids. I don't know. I'm surrounded by kids all the time right these days. And so I'm like, it's just right there for me. But if you don't have them, I don't know, go hang out at a park.
Yeah. What I did when I was writing my first one with a child, my kid was probably 4 or 5 years older than what I wanted my kid to be. Mm. And it had been a while since I had that age of a kid. So what I did was I went out on YouTube and I just searched 3-year-old talking and just listened to several videos of 3-year-olds just talking. And I was like, oh yeah, I kind of remember how they were like at that age. And it helped me a lot get the dialogue and how they would sound.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
That's a great idea. I definitely think it's an audible thing, something you really need to listen to. There's not really a research book. There's not, I know that people who study speech therapy and things like that might have a lot of hallmarks for like standards where kids should be at certain ages or certain steps, but there's nothing really like hearing it to being able to know how to translate it. In my Christmas book that I put out in 2020, I had a 2-year-old that was, it was a single mother with a 2-year-old. And so all of my kids are 6 and older now, but I have a niece who is currently 2 years old. And I really fashioned that character around her. And I think that this is something that's really tricky. One of the things I've seen, to answer Julie's question specifically, I think when kids say mommy and daddy a lot, and it makes them sound really young. So I've seen people that have older kids calling their parents mommy and daddy, and it really makes them sound like a very, very young child. And on the same note, if you have a really young child and they're using full long sentences or sentences with complicated structures, then it makes them sound older than they are. 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds are really using very simple sentence structures. They're using simple words, and a lot of times they're not pronouncing things correctly. So they're going to drop consonants. They're going to put different consonants on there. Like instead of saying the, which is kind of a hard sound to make, to learn, they will say duh. So they'll say dat or dis. That kind of structure. So like you just need to learn to listen to see how they're structuring how they structure the way they talk, and then listen for those sounds that they make that you can translate. It's kind of like if you're trying to write an accent for somebody or trying to write, some kind of speech impediment or something like that. There are cues you can use with, creative spellings even to make the really young child's dialect stand out. But you obviously have to play with it because you don't want just like lines and lines and lines of really difficult. But dropping a few of them in here and there, is a good
I think
way.
sparingly is good. But I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, it's really hard to write the really young speakers. But another thing is, I would say kids are just like any other character. Like you can't stereotype them. And you can't say all 8-year-olds talk like this, because they don't. When I look at my son, who is turning 11 next month, with boys that are within weeks or months of his age, there's a huge range in how they talk and how they behave, like maturity wise, what they're interested in, and especially like how they are able to talk like in social settings versus with their family versus, to their teacher at school. There's all those same dynamics that apply to adult characters apply to kids. So be careful that you're not just whitewashing their dialogue, and that you understand that there's a lot of, anxiety or confidence or personality, all these different things in the mix that will change how your character talks. So be sure that you're giving them the, full-bodied creation that you would give an adult, and you allow them to have, all those nuances to their characterization. Anybody else have anything else on that?
I think you did a great job.
Yeah.
Well, before we go over to talking about elderly characters, Christy says, do you see cliches in writing children and elderly? For example, is the precocious child now cliche?
I think you can still do it. Just don't do it in every single one of your books. Maybe have a precocious child in one, and then have like a serious kid in another, and just vary it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And give them their specific quirks and their own specific personality too. I think if you build a character on one thing, it's going to be one-dimensional. But if you can build your character on many facets, then you have a well-rounded character.
Yeah. Give them their own background story and everything, so you know what makes them the way they are.
Yep. So what are some of your favorite kids that you've written or read?
I've only written a couple. I liked one of my assisting. I changed the title, so I'm like, what is the title again? Assisting my brother's best friend. I had a little nephew. There were two nephews. There was one who was like more serious, and then one who was just playful and fun, and he was a little younger too. And he was just the younger one. He was just a lot of fun because he was able to like pick up on things and be like, oh, what about this thing? And bring like awkwardness into the situation, because he would like point out and notice things about my character and bring it up. And then also I just like that they can show the like the side of the main characters that will be like a good parent in the future and kind of show their sweetness.
Yeah.
Or if they're a villain, then they're not so nice to the kids. So yeah. So that's probably my favorite.
So the first kid I ever wrote was from a book that I used the child in order to lighten up some of the situations in the book, because there were some heavier concepts in the book. And the main male character was dealing with quite a bit, and he also was famous and pretty arrogant. And so I used the child to open up and reach his soft side, so the reader could see that, oh yeah, he is a good guy deep down inside, even though he's kind of mean a little bit. So that was really fun. I also like to use children to lighten things up, because I write rom-com. I like to use them for the humor of it. So that's always fun to get situations in there where children can just say the funniest things.
Yeah. So in my first billionaire book, I have a son, like a boy, that his name is Taylor, not that anybody cares, but he's like around 7 or 8 years old, which is the age that my son was when I wrote it. So I really used him to flesh it out a lot. But his mom and dad had recently divorced. So it was like a fresh wound. It was something that he was still dealing with the trauma of that. And so I allowed him to be petulant. I allowed him to be moody. I allowed him to argue with his mother and to be unhappy. And then I also tried really hard to show how much he wanted to be accepted and loved and feel secure. And so, and that it wasn't like a one-way street for him. Like his emotions weren't just straight and expected. They were just all over the place, which is how I expect a kid would feel about things. And so that was an interesting writing exercise for me, because it allowed me to do a lot of important things with the plot. But it also made him a very real person to me, because he did have such complex emotions that I always had to stop and think, okay, how is he going to be reacting in this situation? And sometimes I use that to change the dynamics of a scene, where if he wasn't there, a scene would have gone a different way than it did. So I really enjoyed the process of writing that character, and it's kind of stuck with me a lot. I think he's probably one of the more complex characters that I've written, interestingly enough. So it was a lot of fun. Okay, let's talk more about our elderly characters. So we're going to ask a lot of the same questions. And I put these two together because I think, and it's interesting to me that a lot of the traits we have as a child, we kind of revert back to as we get older. And I think in a lot of ways, they're treated really similarly, oddly enough. So what are some of the common struggles you've seen authors having with elderly characters?
I don't know.
I think just forgetting to put any elderly characters in the book.
Yeah, like that's my problem. I've only had like one elderly person in all of my books.
Yeah, I don't do them a lot. Usually if I write an elderly character, they are either like the villain, where it's like the older stepmom or something like that, and they're what's keeping the two of them apart, or the quirky older aunt who's just
busybody,
says all the funny things, and it's really quirky.
Yeah. So I've had them as neighbors. I think I've had them as coworkers. Sometimes, they're important. Like you said, family members. They're often used as matchmakers. They're commonly used in the matchmaker trope a lot. And they're in a lot of books where like somebody's trying to save some situation, like save her grandma's home or something like that. One of the ways I see elderly people used a lot is kind of like a save the cat kind of situation where they go and like volunteer at the nursing home or something. And so then you end up being in a scene with like a lot of senior citizens and a lot of them, dealing with mental health or, a lot of more advanced physical issues. Mm-hmm. And so, I see a lot of nursing home tropes put into books, scattered through them. And it's great. I just think that there are a lot of things that people do use as cliches for older people. So we're going to touch back on the second half of Christy's question. So some of the ones I've seen is that they are often portrayed as really helpless or infantile, or that they are, the authors use their age as their personality. Does that make sense? Like they're old, so this is their personality now. And that's kind of where you get into the cliche. Like they're like the sweet grandma who bakes you cookies and gives you warm advice and always knows how you're feeling and is there to give you a hug when you're having a hard time and, that sort of thing. I've had the neighbor lady that lived next door and she'd have a tray of cookies and a glass of or lemonade, kind of thing. So I don't think that there's anything wrong with those because I know plenty of elderly women who make a mean cookie and definitely love to give you hugs. But I think we can do more for them and we can recognize that they're going to have goals. And even though they're old, it doesn't mean that they are done trying to accomplish things or that they're not going to grow as a person or that they're not going to have flaws or necessarily even have life figured out. I know a lot of older people who, are in the middle of getting divorced or getting married again, or, like their lives are changing. They're trying to rediscover who they are after retirement or after, a health issue or something like that. So, what are some things that you guys think people could do to really avoid some of these cliches that we were talking about? Like, how do you flesh out an elderly character to be more than just a cardboard placeholder?
Yeah, we'll give them their own, like you do with the kids, give them their own background story, give them their own personality and goals that they're working towards.
Yep, absolutely.
Them their own person, just like you would with the rest of your characters.
Yep, think about their wants and needs and their desires and what makes them different from everybody else.
Yeah, so I'm like when you're talking about the sweet grandparents that always just bring over the cookies and stuff. That was not like mine. Like I lived with, I grew up. We took care of my grandpa, and he lived with us when I was in like 6th grade, and then a couple years later we lived with my grandma, and then a few years later we had my other grandma. So they like I lived with old people the whole time. None of them were the same, and they weren't the make cookies and have fun with you kind ever. So that is not realistic to me. But so just make them like you do your other characters.
Yeah. My grandmother is in her 90s now, and I think she could still outwalk me because she's got her walking group that she goes out with every morning. And I'm sure she could outwalk me and she could probably outshop me. And, it's amazing when you try and put like a real person as your sort of inspiration for these characters, how much more real they become, how much more fleshed out they become. And so I think that is always a good idea, is to choose like a real person.
Yeah.
Or several real people and pull different traits from them. So
go visit a nursing home, like they say, and talk to them and see how different each person there is.
I had to show this. Chrissy said skydiving grandma.
Yeah, I had my husband's grandma did that for her 80th birthday. She went skydiving. So yeah, people are different.
And the older I get, the more I realize that they're not that old. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Like when I was a teenager, 40 seems so old, and now I'm 40. I'm like, I'm not old, you know.
Yeah.
And if you talk to somebody who's 85, they feel exactly the same way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they don't feel old. They don't
Yeah.
consider themselves to like be old. They might feel old. Like I feel old at 40 a lot.
Yeah.
But you know, they still want to look pretty and be complimented, and they still want to be successful at whatever they're doing, and they still want to have strong relationships and ties.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just a matter of showing that your character respects them and that you as an author respects them. You know, and even if they're like a villainous character, that in a way is giving them respect, because you're showing that they have the ability to put hurdles and obstacles in front of people, and to plot and strategize, and to, you know, really be a mastermind of a situation. So it's really interesting when you start looking at it that way. So I don't know. It feels like some of these things are just almost obvious, and there's not a whole lot to talk about. So it's going to be kind of a shorter episode today.
That's totally fine.
But it's amazing. It's amazing how like we can know this in our head, but when we sit down to actually do it in our books, it's a lot harder to convert it into practicing with the words on paper.
Because with me, I'm still just like, I still just want to have the quirky old lady who's the matchmaker who embarrasses my female character all the time. Like I still want to do that. Need to vary their personalities and things that they do, and they can still embarrass them and not be as quirky.
It's always interesting to me when I read reviews, because to me the most important characters are the love interests, right? And everybody else is just a sideshow. But in my actual writing, we all know I also write my secondary characters better than my main characters. So I end up getting a lot of people who really like my side characters and comment about it. I've had a lot of people really like, especially some of my older characters. And so it's important for me to remember how important of a role they play in connecting your readers to the story. You know, that they're not just there to make certain things happen in the plot, that they can actually be part of what hooks a reader. You know, the more readers are tied into or invested in multiple characters in your story, you know, it's good to like recognize that that's going to help them stay invested and carry through the whole experience. And a good way to figure that out, I think, is to use beta readers or critique partners, and specifically sometimes ask them those questions, like, how did you feel about this character? And if they're just kind of like, don't really have anything, then maybe that's a character you could go in and figure out what you can do about it, about making them a little bit more vibrant. Like a rounded character, an interesting character, than just kind of like that cardboard cutout person. So what are some of your favorite old characters in like movies or books? Can you think of any?
Well, I just watched The Proposal recently, and that grandma is funny. So, and it's fun to see, because I always grew up thinking my grandmas were always like, I don't know, old and just like and like kind of stoic a little bit, and just didn't like joke around or have fun. And so it was fun to see that grandma, like, that's the baby making blanket and whatever she does in that. So that was a fun one.
Yeah, I always really liked in the Anne of Green Gables series, I always thought that Matthew and Marilla and Rachel Lynn and all those that were kind of like in the older stages of their lives, you know, how different their personalities all were. And how rich and full, you know, that their characterization was within the book.
There were a lot of older characters in that book series that had very different personalities. And they were very vibrant people.
Yes. And I also really enjoyed I just had this thought and now it's like gone away. It was a movie. Was it the Crazy Rich Asians? Wasn't there a grandma character? There's a grandma character in that one. It was really fascinating because she was like the matriarch of her family, and she was powerful, and she was like in control, and she knew everybody in the family and pulled their strings like a puppet master. And when she and the main character, the female, kind of like went up against each other, like it was a really great sort of fireworks display. Like there's this lot of chemistry, I think is and that's, I think, a real key in this whole thing is, do your characters have chemistry with your kids and with your older couples? And too many people think of chemistry as only belonging between the love interests, and it's not. Chemistry is simply, an electrical reaction that characters have with each other that creates change or creates dynamics within a scene and makes the reader want more of those characters on screen together in the story. So I always really like seeing a really, really sort of powerful and successful female figure who's like older. It's really fun to see. So,
because that's how we want to be. We want to be successful ladies, powerful.
Yeah. Before we go, Christy's been like sharing lots of comments with us. So here's this fun comment she made. Even kids and elderly have a backstory. Kids could have been preemies and dawdled over all their lives, or the elderly could have been alive when Elvis was controversial, and that had an impact on them. Backstory builds that richness that you're talking about. Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting to ask. Oh, sorry. I don't know how to get rid of that now. Hide. Nope.
We both did it at the same time.
It's always interesting to sit and figure out exactly what they've been through in their lives, especially with the elderly people. Like what has happened in their lives. What have they seen? What have they lived through that has shaped them? And it's so good when you can find somebody who's a storyteller and just really, really dig into their lives. I remember when I was in college, I was in a what was the name of the class? I can't remember, but it was a Black American Studies class. So it was, specifically about Black history. And one of my assignments was to go and do an interview with somebody who had lived during the now I'm going to have a brain freeze. Do you remember Arkansas was famous for integrating its schools in Little Rock, the Little Rock Nine, and all that sort of stuff? So I was supposed to go and find somebody who had lived and like experienced that happening in real life and interview him. And I found somebody that worked down at City Hall, and I went to interview him, and I went prepared with like my specific questions that were all kind of like about that time period and what things had, what that experience had been like for him. But he was so good at telling stories. And so we ended up just like talking and talking and talking. And he was telling me about, all kinds of stuff that I didn't even realize had ever happened. It wasn't part of my frame of reference for history, because history in that time period was something I'd only read about in books, but it was something that he lived through. And so he just had so much more context and perspective on things than I could have had from reading a book. And so it really taught me, the importance of storytelling, of that, what's it called? The history that's passed on audibly through story. There's like a word for it or a phrase for it. It's really, really important. So I would say if you really want to nail these characters and have them come true to life, there is always opportunities for you to go and interview somebody, just sit and talk to them, even a kid. Like, it would be so revealing and fun to sit down and ask one of your friends or like your niece or your nephew, like, hey, can I interview them? And just sit and talk to them for a while and get them to tell you stories and ask them about their day, ask them about their friends, and see how they talk to you and how they tell you about it. And the phrases they use, all that sort of stuff. And even use like a voice recorder so that you can go back and listen to it again. Just really great ways to try and bring some reality and some teeth to the way you write these characters. So
good suggestion.
So I hope that something in this has been helpful. I hope that if you are writing characters that maybe you're not familiar with because they're not like you, that this will give you some ideas for how to go about, bringing them to life in your stories. So thanks for watching, and we'll be back again. Does anybody have their calendar in front of them? Because I don't know if we have a 5th Thursday. We'll be back on
probably the first
April
Thursday
1st.
of April.
And it won't be an April Fool's Day joke. We really will come and be here. So,
unless we disappear.
We might play some pranks for you on the show, but we will have a show. Watch for that to be announced in our Facebook group. If you haven't joined our Facebook group, you can find us. We're just called The Writing Gals. And so you can watch us live and comment there. We'll see you live during our feed, and you get to be able to participate in all of the amazing resources we have there in the community. And if you're in our Facebook group, then go ahead and join our YouTube channel, subscribe to it, and click the notification bell, because we all know Facebook doesn't always tell you when things are going to be happening. But YouTube does a really good job of telling its subscribers, hey, this person you like to watch is coming on live.
Yeah.
So
and go ahead and watch the past videos too. We have like
80
something. Yeah. And I always see questions like, what do I do with this? I'm like, we got a video on that, guys. So feel free to check out all of those.
Yep. So thanks so much. And I hope that wherever you are, whatever you're writing, that you have lots of success this week. And we'll see you again soon.
See ya.
Bye.